This is what $10,000 looks like in casino chips at the Wynn Las Vegas. That $10,000 buys you this piece of paper. It's an entry into the WPT World Championship main event. And what do all these people who are playing poker in this gigantic ballroom at the Wynn have in common? Every single one of them ponied up that $10,000, creating a tournament prize pool of just under $30 million. And we're playing it as well, playing for a $4 million first place prize. It gets even better. We're already on to day 2.
All right, here we go for day 2. My table is this one right back here. I don't recognize anybody over there, so maybe that's a good sign. Maybe it doesn't necessarily matter. I'm sure there's some tournament players that I'm not aware of that are absolute killers out there in the world. So maybe it means something, maybe it doesn't. But we got ourselves about 32 big blinds or so, 90-minute levels today, so that should give us some time to hopefully find some spots and hopefully quadruple up today. That's the goal, quadruple up. Or if we can double up or triple up, those are good too. Or sextuple up, I'll take any of them.
160,000 is what we're working with to start the day. As mentioned, good for 32 bigs at the moment. And I'm also going to be keeping track of how 4 other people in this field are doing. I managed to win 4 satellites into this tournament on WPT Global, which I gave away to some very deserving non-professional poker players. Joan, Jesse, Elle, and Lorianne. They're all in the mix, and if any of these giveaway winners can manage to cash this thing, I'll be sure and let you guys know. First significant hand of the day comes as we're playing the 3,000, 5,000 level. This is just a few hands into the first orbit. We are under the gun and we are looking down at pocket 10s. Pocket 10s is a good hand, so I make it 10,000 to go from under the gun. The player 2 to my left, under the gun +2, he re-raises to 29,000. Action folds back over to me and I have not played a hand yet, so we still have our 160,000. 32 big blinds to start the hand. Maybe a 4-bet jam all in is reasonable, but since my initial raise came from under the gun and this 3-bet came from an early position player as well, I think ranges are going to be pretty narrow here. So I elect to flat call. This player does cover me. I'm going to tread a little bit lightly here in the early going, and we are going to go heads up to a flop, which comes down extremely favorable for these pocket 10s. 10-5-3 with 2 clubs. We flop the nuts here. I check it over to the aggressor, who puts out a continuation bet of 28,000. If we happen to have middle set here or bottom set, then I think I might be more inclined to check raise. Even though there's a flush draw out there, I think we block a reasonable amount of the continuing range. If we have one of those other sets, maybe that would unlock some of his bluffing hands, such as King 10 suited, Ace 10 suited, 10 9 suited. If he happens to have a hand like Ace King or Ace Queen, I don't want to push a hand like that out. And if he's got an overpair, well, as long as the club doesn't come on the turn, I think we can get the maximum here. So I flat call, and we're off to a turn card, which is a very nice looking 8 of spades. We still have the nuts here. Check it over to my opponent again, who thinks for a little bit. He eyes my stack, sees what I have left, and
All in.
All in. Oh, let's see, guys.
Roll it over, and it turns out we are up against pocket kings. So we just have to fade 2 outs here. No king on the river. And it's a clean one. 9 of spades. Right off the bat here in orbit number 1 on day 2, we find a full double up.
116.
As I'm stacking my chips up from that hand, the craziness continues. The very next hand off the deck, that same player who just had pocket kings the last hand, he's very short stacked now. He goes ahead and jams the rest of his chips into the middle in this very next hand.
All in.
There's a player in middle position who is also shorter stacked, and he decides he wants to play for all of his chips as well.
Come on.
All in.
He reshoves, goes all in, and action folds over to me sitting in the big blind, and I finally get a chance to look down at my cards, and those cards are none other than pocket aces.
All right, guys, all 3 hands, please.
Just an incredible turn of events, an insane start to this day. We roll over the hands and we're up against Ace King and pocket 6s, and the flop comes ace high. Just A marvelous, incredible, unbelievable start to day 2 in the WPT World Championship main event here. Better than I could have possibly imagined. Banging off 2 monster hands, cracking kings with 10s, and then getting aces all in versus 2 players. We eliminate those 2 players, and we are nicely stacked up here from 160,000 in chips to start the day, all the way up to 482,000 in chips. What a start. All right, so you can't win every hand in a tournament, obviously, and your stack is going to ebb and flow. And after those monstrous hands, our stack does ebb a little bit down to 420 or 430,000. Nothing to worry about, of course. Still very healthy after that fantastic start. In this next hand, the low jack raises it up to 10,000, playing the same blinds. We look down at ace jack offsuit. We're in position. We're kind of deep stacked here. I'm just going to flat call, and the big blind defends. So we got 3 ways to a flop this time. Ace 10-8 with 2 diamonds, 1 heart. Big blind checks. Initial raiser puts out a C bet of 13,000 this time. We have a very easy call, and the player in the big blind folds. Turns to king of hearts, and this time my opponent checks it. We could bet it. We could check it back. I'm not sure if I'm going to get 3 streets versus a worse hand, although it is pretty draw heavy now, so I definitely don't hate a bet. Maybe that's optimal, but I decided to check it back. Rivers a total brick, offsuit 3, and he checks it again. Now we definitely have to go for value. I put out a small wager. I bet 11,000. I'm targeting a king. There are some draws that missed, and I think my bet is a little bit on the small side here, but just trying to drive some value here versus a king or maybe a weak ace. And my opponent does make the call. I feel good about it. We roll it over, and it turns out it is good. Drag this one in, and that takes us up to 479,000 in chips. We were in the way back corner of this ballroom, and the table is one of the first ones to break of the day. We get moved to a new table, more in the middle of the room. This table features David Baker on my direct left, a very accomplished poker player, as well as another guy named Brian Rast. We played with him in a previous tournament, the Blvd 5 Diamond. He's got millions and millions in tournament earnings. Not exactly the best change of scenery here, but let's see if we can pick up some hands versus these guys. In this hand, the player in the under the gun +2 position raises it up to 13,000. We look down at Jack 9 of diamonds in the button. It looks pretty. We've got the button. We'll have position. I'm going to go ahead and make the call. Heads up to a flop that gives us top pair on 9-4 deuce rainbow. My opponent checks. I'm definitely betting here. I decide on a sizing of 10,000, and my opponent makes the call. Turn is the 6 of spades, second spade. My opponent checks again. I don't see any reason to stop betting here. I feel like if my opponent had a strong hand or a straight draw on the flop that completes on the turn here, probably would have put out a wager, so I'm going to fire again, this time for 23,000. Once again, my opponent calls. Off to a river card, which is an offsuit 8, and my opponent checks again. We still have top pair here. Maybe my opponent is non-believing with an ace-high hand, or maybe he's got himself a small or medium pair. I feel like my hand is pretty good, so I'm going to put out another value bet. I'm going to bet small, though, and try and derive value from those hand classes that I mentioned. I bet 25,000 here, and my opponent kind of shrugs, and he makes the call. We roll it over, and once again, we are good. Off to a fantastic start on this day 2. Everything clicking so far, and that takes our stack up to 560,000 heading into the first break of the day. After the break, we come back to the blind level of 3,000 and 6,000, and this is the second hand in this new level. We are in early position, under the gun +2, looking down at 10-9 of hearts. Very pretty suited connector here, well within our opening range. I'm going to go ahead and make it 12,000 to go. Folds all the way around to the big blind, who defends. We're going heads up to a flop that comes down 7-6 deuce 2 spades. My opponent checks. We've got ourselves a gut shot, straight draw, and 8 would give us the nuts. I feel like ranges are somewhat neutral, but we're going to have all the overpairs, so I feel like a C bet is in order, and I feel like I want to go bigger on this board since he can call with lots of holdings. So I wager 15,000, and my opponent wants to play for more. He pretty quickly check raises to 52,000. And it's going to be a little bit tough for us to continue here. No hearts out there for some backdoor flush draw dreams. Even if our opponent is check raise bluffing with a flush draw, a lot of those are going to have us in pretty bad shape. So I feel pretty comfortable that we can just let this one go. Shortly after that, we look down at a suited one gapper this time. Jack 9 of hearts. I go ahead and raise it up, and we face no resistance this time. Always good to win the blinds and ante. In this next hand, we look down at King Jack of spades. We're in the under the gun position. 40% of a royal flush. I'm raising. I make it 12,000 to go, and the player in the cutoff makes the call. Heads up to a flop that comes down queen high, all hearts. That's not the suit that I had in mind, so I check it over to my opponent. He goes ahead and wagers something. Not a whole lot going on here for us. I go ahead and make the fold. Shortly after that, there's a raise and lay position. We've got ourselves queen 6 offsuit. We defend versus the min raise, but we whiff this hand as well. Just go ahead and check fold versus a continuation bet here. In this hand, the under the gun +2 player raises it up to 13,000. We've got ourselves pocket 8s in position. Very standard flat call here. All the other players get out of the way. So heads up to a flop that comes down queen jack 4 with 2 diamonds. Not a great flop. So when my opponent checks it over to me, I'm just going to go ahead and check this one back with the 2 overcards on the board. Turn is an offsuit 5, and this time my opponent bets 20,000. Plenty of straight draws that my opponent could do this with. Ace king or ace 10 type holdings. Don't want to throw away the pocket 8s for just the one bet, so I go ahead and make the call. River is an offsuit jack. Feeling okay about that card because I feel like my opponent might have delay c-bet with a jack on the turn, and this jack makes it less likely that he would have a jack. My opponent does check here on the river. I'm taking this one to showdown. I check it back, feeling pretty good, and I see that my opponent has queen 9 of spades, which I thought was something else. I misread his hand, but that's top pair, and that is good enough for the pot.
12,000 is the raise.
In this next hand, we are in the hijack, looking down at queen jack of hearts. Once again, 40% of a royal flush. I'm in there. I make it 12,000 to go. Folds over to the big blind who wants to play for a little more, and it's just a little more. He 3-bets up to 31,000. That's not a very big 3-bet, especially being out of position. So we have a very easy call here, going heads up to a flop that does not improve us. 8-4 deuce rainbow. My opponent checks it, and I'm happy to take a free card here. I go ahead and check it back. Turn does not improve us. It's the 8 of diamonds, second diamond. This time he goes ahead and bets something with just queen high here. Not too much in the way of hopes and dreams, so I go ahead and let this one go. In this next hand, the hijack raises it up to 15,000. We are in the big blind looking down at ace 9 of hearts. Very defendable. I go ahead and call it 15,000. Heads up to a flop that comes 10-6-5 rainbow. We seem to have run out of momentum here as far as connecting with boards. I go ahead and check it, and my opponent bets 15,000 once again. We could beat hands like king queen, king jack, 7-8, ace deuce through ace 4. So again, while we're not in love with this flop, there are some hands that we can beat, so I go ahead and make the call. Turn is the jack of hearts. I check, and this time my opponent bets 25,000. We're losing to some more hands now, and it's going to be tough to just check call and get to showdown here and hope to have the best hand, so I go ahead and let this one go. My opponent, he's a friendly guy from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and he goes ahead and shows me the pocket queens. Nice hand, sir. However, that continues our downward path down to 400,000 in chips, but once again, a very slow structure, 90-minute levels, got plenty of big blinds still. Moving right along here, we are looking down at another suited ace in hearts, this time the ace 6 of hearts. I make it 16,000 to go, folds over to the big blind who makes the call. Heads up to a flop that gives us top pair on ace 9-7 with 1 heart. My opponent checks. I'm going to go ahead and down bet here on a rainbow board. I'm going to be c-betting this board a lot of the time when it comes ace high. So I downsize to 12,000 and my opponent makes the call. Turn comes the 3 of hearts, which adds the nut flush draw along with our top pair. So when he checks it over to me, I'm definitely going to bet again because if he happens to check raise on this card for some reason, we can definitely continue here, try and improve to a flush if we are behind. I go ahead and wager 32,000 this time. And once again, my opponent, he makes the call. Off to a river card, which comes an offsuit 5, and my opponent takes his time for a little bit, counts out his chips, and decides he's going to go all in on this card. 95,000. Pretty interesting spot here, and honestly, I'm feeling pretty comfortable about this one, especially because our kicker is the 6. The hand that he's most likely representing here would be 6-8. Having the 6 in our hand removes some combos of that possibility. Don't have any blockers to the 10-8 straight draw. Having 2 hearts in our hand is not great, but we've got ourselves top pair. And again, we're blocking the strongest hands. So I don't think we can just throw this one away. I'm going to need to see some proof here. I go ahead and toss in the 95,000 in chips, and we get shown the 9-5 of clubs for a flopped second pair that hangs on versus the top pair plus flush draw and manages to find a second pair on the river. Very unfortunate run out here for us. Bit of a strange line, honestly, by my opponent, because if I ever have any bluffs here, he just shuts those out. But apparently he read me perfectly for just the top pair, and he's going to go ahead and win the maximum versus us. double that man up. Not a good feeling after so much was going right earlier in the day and now very much trending in the wrong direction, taking us all the way down to under 100,000 in chips after these recent hands. And to be honest with you, I was feeling super defeated and discouraged, especially after that last hand. Now, normally I'm a professional poker vlogger. Normally I try and do my best here on these day twos to capture as many hands as possible, but I missed this next hand where that same fellow, he opens from the hijack and we look down at pocket queens in the small blind. With less than 16 big blinds in our stack now, I think we've got ourselves an easy jam out of the small blind. We don't want to slow play these queens because there's too many flops that will contain an ace or a king that will be tough for us to navigate. So I go ahead and jam it all in, and that opponent calls with ace 10. We're off to the races here. The flop is a clean one, the turn is a clean one, and the river is a clean one. So we are still alive here on day two in this tournament. We find the double with pocket queens, back up to around 210,000 after that hand. Feeling better, but still not feeling great. My filming and vlogging skills have not come back to full strength just yet, but as you can see in this clip, something has happened. One orbit later, again with us about 210,000 in chips, we look down at pocket queens once again. I go ahead and raise in late position, and my friend from Edmonton is now in the small blind, and he puts in a 3-bet up to 52,000. Pretty much the same situation as before. I don't think we want to slow play here. My opponent has played a reasonable number of hands, so I certainly don't need to assign him only the strongest hands. I'm going to go ahead and get all 210 of my chips into the middle. I 4-bet jam, send them all in, and my opponent does not snap call, so that is a good sign. He gives it the sigh, but he does decide that what he has is too strong to fold. He goes ahead and makes the call, and it turns out we are in a flipping situation against ace king. We're off to the races here, and the flop comes down jack 10-4 with 2 hearts, so we no longer want to see a queen as well as an ace or a king. The turn is not a good one. It's the king of hearts, so we no longer have the best hand, but we do have a flush draw as well as a straight draw of our own. Heading into the river, we're going to need some help in order to stay alive here, or our day is going to be done here on day 2. And the river is not a heart, but it is the 9 of diamonds, which gives us a straight on the river. It was not the way that I was expecting to win this hand with a king high straight. Heading into this river card, I was not rooting for a 9 so much, more for a heart, but the 9 of diamonds will work. And we are very much on the roller coaster here with about 30 minutes to go in this level.
All right, so that last level was absolutely ridiculous, and I'm not gonna lie, I gave up a little bit there, at least on the vlogging part. I did not give up on the trying to find a good hand and get all in part, because I did that twice with pocket queens. I did give up on the filming. I missed a couple of those hands there, but we are very much on the roller coaster here. We've gone from 160K all the way up to 550K, all the way down to 95K, and now back up to 414,000. Big blind will be 10K when we come back after this break. So riding the waves here.
Now, I'll be honest here, my play out of the blinds in tournaments is not exactly my strong suit, coming from a cash game background, but no choice, got to get in there in tournaments. You're going to find some hands, you're going to find some tricky spots. In this hand, we look down at ace 3 of spades in the small blind after action folds all the way around to us. I'm just going to go ahead and limp in here. I'll have a pretty wide limping range, throw this one in there as well, and David Baker in the big blind checks it back. The two of us go heads up to a flop, which comes down 9-6 deuce to 2 spades, giving us the nut flush draw. We could check, we could bet. We have some showdown value with ace high here, so I decided to check. And David puts out a bet of 12,000. Going nowhere, of course, I make the call, and the turn comes the 9 of spades, which gives us the nut flush but pairs the board. I decided to check it here again because if David has a 9, he's going to bet. If he has a flush, he's going to bet. And if he has a bluff, well, then he'll probably have to bet with those two. So I go ahead and check it, and David does not disappoint, betting 22,000. I'm going to call here again, and we are off to the river, which is a 4th spade. Now I don't think he's going to be able to bet with his 9x hands, and I don't really want to go for the home run check raise here with the board being paired, so I decide to lead out on the river. I bet 32,000, and we get some very interesting news when David raises us to 100,000. Now this is a really tricky spot because, as mentioned, David is a very accomplished player and he is capable of some things. He's going to be the one to have the strongest hands here since we only check called on the flop. That means we're not going to have too many 2-pair or set holdings on the flop that would have turned a full house. Those types of hands are in David's range much more than mine. So it is possible that he could have those, and it's possible that he could be turning a hand like 9x into a bluff maybe. Very close spot here because I do think David is capable as mentioned, but I decide to give him the credit don't want to toss away the 100,000 in chips. I very reluctantly decide to let this one go, fold this one away, and it's not a good feeling until David is nice enough to show me the 9-6 of hearts. You can see me tapping the table here again towards the end of the hand. That's when he shows me the goods. Turn the full house. Turns out that was not a very good turn card for us, and not a good situation, but could definitely have been worse. One more hand before we go to the break here. We are in the cutoff looking down at Queen 10 offsuit. I'm going to go ahead and raise it up here. Brian Rast, he's in the big blind, and he calls the min raise. Heads up, the two of us to a flop that comes down Jack 8-8 rainbow. Brian checks it. We've got ourselves a gut shot. We've got Queen high, which we can't really show down. Possible for us to have an 8 here. And we've also got some cards in our hand that makes it less likely that my opponent would check raise. So I think all that adds up to a C bet. I bet 10,000, and we get no resistance this time. Always fun winning a pot versus one of the best in the world, even if it's a small one. First interesting hand after the break. We are now playing 5,000 and 10,000 blinds. We look down at pocket fives in the cutoff. Go ahead and raise it up to 20,000. We immediately get 3-bet by David Baker on my direct left, even though I just said he was a very nice guy. He goes ahead and 3-bets it up to 80,000. Folds back over to me. I don't know, not very neighborly of David, but that pretty much shuts us out. It's a big 3-bet, especially with him being in position, and we're not getting very good implied odds here. In these tournaments, your chip stacks are a little bit on the shorter side compared to cash game chip stacks. Just gonna have to fold these pocket fives out of position versus the 4x 3-bet. In this next hand, same blinds, the cutoff raises up to 20,000. We've got the pocket 10s in our hand, and last time we had pocket 10s in this tournament, things went really well for us. I'm on the button, late position versus late position. I think we can find a 3-bet here with the pocket 10s. I go ahead and make it 42,000 to go. Folds back to the cutoff, who makes the call. Heads up to a flop that comes down ace, jack 8 with 2 diamonds. Not my favorite flop, but when he checks over to me, I'm gonna have a range advantage here, so I go ahead and c-bet for 22,000. Once again, we get raised up to 80,000 in back-to-back hands here. Don't think we can do too much here with our pocket 10s. We can't take too much heat. We also block a lot of hands that my opponent could be check raising as a bluff. With 2 10s, as well as one of them being a diamond, we block hands like 9-10, queen 10, king 10, 10x of diamonds, all sorts of stuff that my opponent could be check raising as a bluff. So I think we have a pretty easy fold here. I let it go. No information to be found, but very unlikely to be the best hand, I think. In this next hand, we look down at pocket 9s. I'm going to go ahead and raise this one up, and both of the blinds make the call. So 3 ways to a flop this time that comes down 10, 8, 5, 2 spades, 1 club. Both players check. Could definitely c-bet here, could check it. I decide versus 2 opponents and 1 overcard out there to check it back. Turn is a 6 of clubs, so now 2 flush draws on board. Both of these opponents check it over to me once again. Doesn't seem like anyone's super interested, so I'm going to go ahead and put out a bet with my pocket 9s. Blocking a lot of the strongest hands, decent chance we have the best hand. I make it 35,000 to go, and both players fold. Happy that nobody raised up to 80,000 this time. Let's drag it in. At this point, we've gotten moved to our 3rd table of the day, and things have not been going as well as they started the day. After getting raised up on that last table several times, and after not making any hands on this new table, we've whittled back down to about 210,000 in chips. And in this hand, action folds over to us in the small blind, looking down at ace 7 of diamonds. I think we've got a couple of options here, but we're trying to get all the money in, essentially. We could limp, and if our opponent raises, we could go ahead and limp jam all in, or we could just open jam it. I decide on that route rather than sometimes playing out of position versus the big blind. I go ahead and jam all in, and my opponent thinks about it for a little bit before deciding on a fold.
All out.
Still in the 6,000, 12,000 level, we're getting closer and closer to the end of the day. Only a handful of hands left to be played. We look down at king, queen off suit in early position. Gonna go ahead and raise this one up to 25,000. Folds all the way around to the big blind, who thinks for a little bit and makes the call. The two of us see a flop that comes down queen 8-4 with 2 clubs. My opponent checks it, and I'm definitely c-betting here, and I don't think I want to down bet. Plenty of draws available on this flop, multiple straight draws plus a flush draw. Also don't want to see an ace roll off. That wouldn't make us super comfortable either. So I'm not going to down bet. Instead, I wager 30,000 in chips, but my opponent is very much undeterred, and he goes ahead and jams all in. We've got him covered, but only by a little bit. However, when we flop top pair here, we're not going to be able to find a fold. We're just going to have to go with it. We're going to hope for the best. We're going to hope that he doesn't have us beat, and If he doesn't, we're going to hope that he doesn't get there. We go ahead, we toss in the call, we see what we're up against, and what we're up against is King Jack of clubs. Not the worst hand to be up against because he doesn't have any overcards, but he is very much live with his flush draw. Turn's a scary one. It's a black card, but it's a 6 of spades, so we're okay so far. Just need to dodge a club on the river, and that's a red card. That's a jack. It gives him a meaningless pair of jacks. Pair of queens, still good here. We managed to knock out a player here towards the end, almost the very end of day 2. Needed those chips. It's not quite a full double up, but pretty close to it. We will happily drag this one in. One more hand of note here before the day is over. And in this hand, the under the gun player raises up to 25,000, folds all the way over to us in the big blind, looking down at pocket 4s. We're going to go ahead and make the call here and defend the big blind. 2 of us go heads up to a flop that comes down 6-5-3, giving us an open ender. I check and my opponent checks it back, giving us a free card. Turn is another 6 of diamonds, second diamond. Could bet for protection or could check. I decided to check it, and once again, my opponent checks it back. River is yet another 6, so we end up with a full house here, and I think we can go for value now versus the ace high hands, the good ace high hands. If we had a hand like king queen or queen jack or 10-9, chances are we're going to want to try and bluff here because we're not going to have any showdown value, and my opponent has shown no strength so far. So I'm going to go ahead and put out a wager, a value bet. I bet 29,000, and my opponent pretty quickly calls here. We roll it over. We've got a full house, and a full house is good. My opponent says that he has ace king, which makes a lot of sense, but our full house is good, and that is going to take us to the end of the day. We win a couple of pots that were very much needed after some rough patches here in the middle of day 2. It's another long tournament day. Again, it was a roller coaster of a day, but things work out in the end of the day. Always feels good to get a bag, and always feels good to put much more than you started the day with into the bag. We started with 160,000, and into the bag, we are putting 505,000. The big blind will be 15K when we come back on day 3. So that's 30-something big blinds to work with. We're happy about it.
Well, the roller coaster continued, and luckily it finished on one of these rather than one of these. 505,000 into the bag for day 3, which starts again tomorrow at noon. We got 404 players left, which means we are 34 players off of the money. So we're going to come back to 15K big blind, give us 30-something big blinds. Hopefully smooth sailing into the money tomorrow, no jinx, fingers crossed, etc. Lorianne, we're still in this thing, huh? How much we got?
I got 1,155,000.
Over $1 million. Feels good. That's awesome. You're one of the big stacks. You're one of the big stacks in this thing.
Oh,
no
I
jinx
don't
or
think
anything.
so.
You don't think so? I don't know. Feels massive to me.
It's still like that.
All right, we're gonna keep it going. Day 3 tomorrow at noon.
I'm excited.
All right, so as mentioned at the end of day 2, we are going to have to play a little bit more tight because it is so important to cash in this tournament. It's important to cash in any tournament, but we've got a $17.4 thousand score if we can happen to make it into the money, which is much more valuable than slightly chipping up while also risking not cashing. So we're going to play a little bit tighter, but we're still going to play some hands here.
All right, day 3 about to start. 399 players are left actually, and 370 are gonna make the money. That, according to my math, leaves 29 players in order for us to make the money. I got myself an iced latte on the table, ready to go, let's go.
In this hand, we get dealt Queen Jack. We go ahead and we put in the min raise, and we immediately get 3-bet by the big blind. That's going to go ahead and force us out of the hand. There's a lot of good players in this tournament, and they don't necessarily need to have premiums to go ahead and re-raise, but an offsuit Broadway hand isn't going to be able to withstand the heat. We send this one into the muck. In this next hand, we're in the big blind. It's not the worst hand. We're going to try and defend it, and it does not work out. We whiff the flop. My opponent c-bets. We let it go. Again, we're not getting too out of line here. We're ticking down closer and closer to the money. As we can see here, we are hand for hand now, couple of eliminations away from being in the money. Hand for hand means that all of the tables will play one hand each, and then they will pause until all hands have completed on all the tables. That prevents any one player or any one table from stalling and allowing all the other tables to play lots of hands and hoping that someone busts. So it's very slow, and it can be very stressful as we go hand for hand and inch our way closer and closer to the money bubble.
8's full is going to double up.
We can take a look here at one of my giveaway winners. Her name is Elle. I love this video because you can see how nerve-wracking it is as you end up getting shorter and shorter stacked. You have to fold a lot of hands. You could basically only play the super premium hands when you're short stacked. You're just hoping, fingers crossed, that somebody busts before you run out of chips. And this is the moment when that happens. Elle is sitting here in the foreground, and just behind her, the cameras are on the table right behind her, as renowned WPT commentator Tony Dunst is all in at that table right over there.
7 on the river, making a straight. That is going to eliminate Tony Dunst.
He gets his hand cracked, and we lose Tony Dunst in this hand. That means the bubble is officially burst, and you can see the excitement in Elle's face on her table. Elle has cashed. She got a free roll into this tournament. She has cashed for at least $17,400. She's going back to British Columbia with at least that much. The good news for Tony is that someone also busted on the table next to him during this hand-for-hand process. Those two players are going to chop a min cash. So instead of $17,400, they are each going to get $8,700 for their efforts. The person who busted just before this doesn't realize it, but they are the actual bubble boy going home with $0, and the rest of us, we are in the money. That leaves us with a stack of about 20 big blinds, and we've got some work to do here because we are still playing for absolutely massive prizes. In this hand, action folds all the way over to me on the button. Now, I don't have a completely well-rounded, precise limping strategy. I do know that it is reasonable to do so with some suited connectors, suited one-gappers like this one. The 9-7 of diamonds, I'm gonna go ahead and try a limp on the button. The small blind calls, and the big blind promptly shoves it all in my face. She goes all in. That's Natasha Mercier there in the big blind, accomplished player in her own right. Jason Mercier is her husband. Very strong poker power couple, exerting all the power right here in this hand, and we have to fold the 9-7 of diamonds. Over the course of the next couple of hands, we get to do the same thing to some other people. In this hand, there's an open, and we look down at the king, queen of clubs. This is going to be very easy poker. We've got ourselves an all-in situation. We send all our chips into the middle. Action folds around to the opener. Who folds? We chip up a little bit.
There was equity in busting him, because we probably wouldn't have had to go to the future table. Seriously, I forgot about that.
One or two hands later, very similar scenario. There's an open from the big stack. We look down at another premium, ace king offsuit. Once again, easy poker. All the chips, send them into the middle, no thought required. Very much hoping to get called by an ace queen or ace jack type hand, but don't even mind if we're flipping. But we'll collect the chips unopposed. We go ahead and drag this one in as well. That is going to take us up to $455,000 heading into the first break of day 3.
Go your break, everyone.
Thank you. Doing the thing. We're still doing the thing.
Oh my God!
We're still doing
cashed,
it. We
Andrew.
cashed.
How?
Because you're a tournament genius, that's
Amazing, hey?
All right, we are on break here. We're chilling in the VIP lounge. I found my fellow vlogger.
Made the money.
We're in the money. This guy's got like 50 some big blinds. I'm at like 20 something again.
Time to double up. Let's go.
Time to double up. It's fun to double up. Happy to be in the money. Just trying to find some spots here, so you can keep it going.
All right, we are back in action following the break, and unfortunately, we are looking down at a bunch of rags. As you can see here, this one looks ugly. We're not going to play it. This hand, not any prettier. It's ugly. We're going to fold it. Once again, this hand's quite ugly. We're not going to play it. We are welcomed back to the table by looking at a bunch of rags throughout the entire first orbit. We chip down after that first orbit, but in the second orbit, there is a bit of action. In this hand, there's a big stack in the cutoff. He goes ahead and puts in the raise, folds over to us in the small blind, and we look down at the ace-10 of diamonds versus that late position open, especially when that player has a big stack. He's going to be opening pretty wide. He's going to be attacking. He's trying to accumulate chips, and we are going to do our best to deny him that opportunity. We're going to go ahead and jam, 3-bet jam with the ace-10 suited, and my opponent folds pretty quickly. Drag this one in, takes us back up to $450,000 in chips. In this next hand, one orbit later, once again, we are in the big blind looking down at ace-5 offsuit. There is a raise that we are going to defend with the ace-5 offsuit. Flop comes down 7-6 deuce, which could be better, could be worse, but we are ahead of some hands. So when we check it, probably going to call a continuation bet, but one does not come this time as my opponent checks it back. Turn, not a good one. It's the king of clubs. Now we lose to a bunch of hands. I check it, and my opponent puts out a wager. I don't think we're going to be able to defend here. We're just going to have to try and protect our stack. Don't want to bleed too many chips with very weak holdings. I go ahead and let it go. Next hand off the deck here, action folds all the way around to us in the small blind. We look down at ace-4 suited. We've got 375,000 in chips, and the big blind is 20,000. That leaves us with under 20 big blinds once again. I think we've got ourselves an easy all-in jam. We don't want to run into any tricky situations post-flop. Just go ahead and raise with what is often, very often, the best hand. Even if we do happen to get called by a better hand, we'll still have 30% chance to win a lot of the time. It doesn't come to that in this instance. My opponent lets it go. Chip up slightly, ever so slightly here.
From the beginning, they supported women with ladies' nights, and they had a summit where women all got together.
All right, action aplenty in this hand. 1 or 2 orbits later, when action folds over to the player in the cutoff, goes ahead and puts in a sizable open raise. He makes it 3x, 65,000 to go. This player had been doing a lot of open limping, so chances are he's got somewhat stronger of a hand than average. The player on the button seems to recognize this. He's got a hand that he wants to play, but he decides to not 3-bet. He decides to flat call in position. Small blind gets out of the way, and it's over to us in the big blind, and we peel these 2 cards, and we're looking down at pocket jacks, which means our action, I think, is going to be forced here. Despite the fact that this raiser had been open limping a lot, and now he's coming in for the 3x raise, the fact that that player on the button calls means I think we are almost certainly going to have to be 3-bet jamming this hand all in. Again, we've got somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 blinds, maybe a little bit less now that we are in the big blind. We've had to pay the ante as well. Pocket jacks, the 4th best hand ever created. And even though this initial raiser is portraying a lot of strength, we've got pocket jacks. Let's be honest here. All these chips are going into the middle. I go ahead and 3-bet jam all in, put our tournament life at risk because both of these players cover me. The initial raiser thinks for a little bit, and he lets it go, which is very good news because we certainly rate to have the best hand versus the player on the button. However, that player on the button, basically, once the initial raiser folds, the player on the button snap calls. I'm feeling okay about it. Perhaps we got a flipping situation, but no, it's even better than that. We were up against pocket 10s of the player on the button. So we are in very good shape here to more than double up because we have the initial raise in there plus the small blind. But when the flop comes out, it is very much not a good one. Well, guys, the fact that I am currently sitting in a massage chair in the VIP lounge here in the Wynn Ballrooms is not a good sign. Happy to have gotten the money in good. Would have had a very workable stack there, but it's kind of the way these things go. You have to run good for the entire tournament or the vast majority of the tournament in order to lock up these massive prizes, these huge scores. Can't complain about a $19,000 score, my second biggest score ever. Oh man, this chair is like, it's great, but it's like pretty intense. Serious pressure and massage work happening here. On to the next one. What can you do? Jacks versus 10s all in, get the money in good. What can you do? Bittersweet. Again, 19K in the pocket, but some big prizes available in this tournament. Signing out from the Win. On to the next one. This event was awesome, by the way. Moving on. Now, despite the sadness of busting with Jacks versus 10s, there's very much some silver linings to this storyline. The first, of course, is that we cashed for $19,150. That money going straight into our pockets. Anytime you get a 5-figure score, how bad can life be? The second silver lining, which in my opinion is an absolutely glorious one, is that my giveaway winner, Lori Ann, not only made it all the way through day 3, not only made it all the way through day 4, but made it to day 5 of the WPT World Championship main event, finishing in an astounding 30th place. Again, she's my giveaway winner, so she was free rolling this tournament. She got to play on the live stream. I think she picked up a ton of fans, and for finishing in 30th place, she collected $119,300. Just an awesome story. You absolutely love to see it because she very much deserves it. She is a super passionate poker player. She loves the poker community. She's always active in chats, in live stream chats, and YouTube comments, and tweets, and all sorts of conversations all over poker. So for her to cash in 30th place for a 6-figure score is an absolutely awesome story, in my opinion.